Hi, welcome to the MacIver Report. It is Friday, June 5th, 2025. I'm Bill Osmolsky, and I'm joined by my colleague,
Mike Lucas,
policy analyst, chief economist. All right, so another exciting week here in Madison, so let's get right into the slideshow. So first up, let's talk about the state budget. We had some budget news this week. First of all, the legislature and Governor Evers reached an impasse on their budget negotiations. We'll talk more about that in a moment. Next step, Joint Committee on Finance continues to hold executive hearings as they build the budget department by department. We also had the third executive hearing this past week. Oh, it wasn't on the 5th. It was on the 5th. Today's the 6th, June 6th.
Yes.
So yesterday on June 5th, JFC had another executive hearing. They're just knocking out the low-hanging fruit now. So here's where we're at on spending and tracking this. This is not an exact science because, it's really hard you can't really sort this thing out until weeks after the budget is passed. That's when the Legislative Fiscal Bureau will release their final report on exactly what the budget costs. It's it gets pretty chaotic as they're throwing it together, but we're doing the best we can to stay on top of it. So the two big items that they took up yesterday were the Medical College of Wisconsin and the Environmental Improvement Program. Now, with the Medical College of Wisconsin, they threw in a little extra general purpose revenue. That is state taxpayer funds that goes to that college. So they upped that a little bit. And then for the Environmental Improvement Program, they threw in about $750 million in new bonding revenue. So that all funds total on the bottom right pane there is all, that includes bonding revenue. So we're at $100 billion, $100.9 billion right now. So
Great.
Keeps ticking up. And at the same time, the big news story this week, other than the executive hearing, was Republicans and Democrats reached an impasse on their budget negotiations. Republicans have been meeting with Governor Evers behind closed doors, which is how they always do it with the budget negotiations. That's how you negotiate. You don't negotiate in an open forum. But anyway, they walked out apparently on Wednesday, and then the Democrats, who are very good at politics and controlling the narrative, just unleashed a barrage of press releases about how Republicans don't care, how they walked out. Governor Evers was trying to bargain in good faith, and so Senate Majority Leader or Assembly Majority Leader Tyler August, he was on Ben Yount's show on Thursday to talk about this, and his big takeaway was his big assessment was Republicans want a really big tax cuts, but Governor Evers wants to really spend a lot more money. And they just can't. There's just no give and take there. The big reason, and this is important for me, why are they negotiating with Governor Evers? Well, Tyler August says it's because it's to get certain guarantees. So, we've talked a lot about Governor Evers' line item veto and how he can use that thing to pretty much rewrite the budget. I mean, his power of line item veto has just gotten completely out of control. Especially now that liberals control the Supreme Court, and whatever Governor Evers wants to do, they help him find a way to do it. So the Republicans, what their thought was, well, let's negotiate with Governor Evers and let's figure out, okay, what's safe, what can we put in the budget that he's not going to touch, get some assurances there, and we'll do some give and take, we'll get our tax cut, we'll give him a little bit more spending. That is what it is. Here's what nobody's saying that's really important. It was pointless to negotiate with Governor Evers in the first place.
Yeah.
Because during the last budget, we talked about this before, Mike, how they had all kinds of agreements with Governor Evers on the last budget. This is we're going to do this for local funding. This is what we're going to do for our school choice, and this is this is how much money we're going to give extra to public education. All agreed. Handshakes, smiles all around. As soon as that budget was signed, Governor Evers put out his veto pen and he started changing that stuff.
Yeah.
He stabbed them in the back. You can't trust the guy. He's a lying weasel. You can't. Yeah. So you can't negotiate with somebody like that. So number one, they should never have tried to negotiate with Governor Evers this time around. Number two, they needed to get in front of the messaging on Wednesday, when the negotiations did fall apart, and say this guy's a lying weasel, we can't trust him. And then number three, there is only one way to veto-proof the budget. Zero-based budgeting.
Yeah.
You can't veto in what's not there. I mean, Governor Evers can get pretty creative, I grant you that, but when you hand him a amount and say, yes, DHS is getting $80 billion this year, he can't, there's no wiggle room there. The problem is the way we do the budget now is it doesn't say, this is what DHS gets. This is how much more DHS gets than last time.
Yes. Yeah.
So, it's build it from the ground up, gives Governor Evers a lot less maneuver space. And as we're about to get into here, you need to figure out exactly what's in that budget. So.
Yeah. Bill, what happens if, they propose a budget and Evers vetoes the whole thing and it just keeps being vetoed? Do we go on like a CR or something like that? How does it work in the state?
Yeah, it's so whatever levels we're funding right now, we'll just continue indefinitely.
Got it.
So July 1st is the start of the next fiscal year. That's when the new budget goes into effect. There have been many times in state history where we have missed that deadline. In fact, I think it was 20 years ago that went all the way. There was the gridlock went all the way till October before they had a budget signed. That creates all kinds of problems for local governments because they need to. The school districts generally do their budgets in October, and the municipalities in November, kind of in that time frame, so late fall. And if they don't know how much money they're getting, it makes it even harder for them to budget. But
yeah. At
least that's what they say. I mean, as we've discovered at the MacIver Institute, none of these units of government or school districts actually have budgets.
Right.
So. And I think there's some retroactive stuff there too after the state finishes their budget. But yeah, it's not a huge deal. But the idea of Governor Evers vetoing the whole budget, I don't know if a governor has ever vetoed the whole budget because that line item veto power is so it's so powerful that it's governors who usually they'll take.
There's just no need. You can just target whatever you want.
Yeah, and if they're ticked off about it, they'll just do some spiteful vetoing take it out through their veto pen. So what happens if Governor Evers vetoes the whole budget? I've talked about this before. How my personal theory is this would end up in front of the Wisconsin Supreme Court. The Wisconsin Supreme Court has gone on the record in one of their recent rulings that they believe the legislature is required by the Constitution to pass a budget every biennium. So they're going to leverage that to say you need to write a budget, and you need to write one that the governor is going to sign.
Yeah.
And if you cannot write a budget the governor's going to sign, we'll write it for you.
Which at that point, revolution, because there's no such thing as government anymore. If you have a Supreme Court taking over the powers of the legislature.
Now, Mike, I feel like you're setting me up here, with a softball, but no, that's not the case because this has already happened in Wisconsin.
Oh.
When we did the legislative maps, the legislature has the express authority within the state constitution to draw the legislative maps.
Yeah.
Governor Evers refused to sign them. The Supreme Court stepped in. They said, well, either you're going to draw maps that the governor is going to sign or we're going to draw maps for you. So the legislature took the maps that Governor Evers drew and said, fine, we'll pass these. So, there is also, not only is there recent precedent that the Supreme Court said you must write a budget, the Constitution tells you have to. We also have recent precedent of how Governor Evers has a very effective strategy for wrestling legislative power away from the legislature. So, yeah, interesting times. But yeah, that's maybe it's post state constitutional government that we're in right now. So let's talk a little bit about Evers' secret cuts because, the Republicans didn't do a very good job exploiting this, but Governor Evers actually had a really bad week. And let's start off with this. Governor Evers terminates the senior employment program without warning. That's the exact headline on the MacIver Institute. So this is a really interesting story. Vicki McKenna, a radio show host on iHeartRadio, she emailed me last Thursday and said, I got a listener who sent me this tip about how she's in Rock County and that they're canceling the senior employment program down there, and she's sure it's all Trump's fault.
Right.
So I said, well, Vicki, let me make some phone calls. So I called the Rock County Aging Resource Center, department of county government every county has. That would be the natural place where you think you would find the government senior employment program. They had to do a little bit of, flipping through their phone book and forwarding me around. But no, the county government does not administer the senior employment program. The Workforce Development Board, the local Workforce Development Board, administers that program. So this is something I never realized because, I've gone to the Rock County Job Center for years for various stories, going all the way back to when I worked for Channel 27. They are not part of the state government. I always thought they were part of the Department of Workforce Development.
Yeah.
They are a 501c3 charity.
Yeah, nonprofit.
Yeah. So there's a lot of that in government. There's a lot of agencies and organizations out there that you think are governments, and all they do is government programs, but they are not governments. So just interesting tidbit there. Anyway, so they're really upset about this. And I talked to the program coordinator. He said, look, DHS just called us up this week and told us they're ending the program on June 30th. And I said, this is really weird. The state budget hasn't been written yet. The state, so you get this grant through DHS. The legislature hasn't even addressed DHS's portion of the budget yet. I started doing a little bit more digging. It's like DHS didn't ask for any money for this program in their budget request. Governor Evers didn't ask for any money in his budget proposal. This isn't in any budget that I can find. The Legislative Fiscal Bureau, which does very thorough analyses of state operations every 2 years, nowhere mentioned. I have to start really doing some really deep searches on the legislature's website so I find a mention of this, going all the way back to 1978, this program is mentioned. So it's been, first of all, this program the state of Wisconsin has been managing this program for at least 45 years, and it's never been on any budget. It's completely off the books. Now, I don't know how much of it, but most of the funding for this program does come from the federal government. Federal government established it 60 years ago. Mm-hmm. So it's potentially been in Wisconsin for 60 years, right. Off the books. Yeah. So we got a problem with accountability and transparency right out of the gate. So the idea that, maybe this is Trump's fault. Well, Trump hasn't touched this program. None of the funding doesn't come from USAID or anything like that. This is a Department of Labor grants program. So Trump hasn't touched that. And again, the Congress is still working on the federal budget. So you can't, they haven't cut it. So after I talk to the program coordinator, he gives me the point of contact at DHS. I call her up. She won't even tell me what the program is. Won't even answer my most basic questions. She has no idea what MacIver is. She just, I'm sending this over to our communications team. They'll get in touch with you. They never got in touch with me.
Right.
I get off the phone with her. The Workforce Development Board, the executive director for the Southwest Board, she calls me up and she's upset. And she just kind of unloads on me for a half hour, just telling me about this program, how important it is. There's only 300 people in Wisconsin that are in this program. It's for low-income senior citizens. And then she starts explaining all this program does is it places low-income senior citizens with no job skills into temporary nonprofit or government jobs, and it subsidizes their minimum wage.
Yeah.
So it's wow. I mean, talk about, end of the line safety net here.
Yeah.
This is the last thing standing between them making ends meet and losing their home. A common situation she described to me was, these are, imagine the housewife who becomes a widow. She's never worked. She has no income. And, she's completely on her own now. So there are a lot of people in that situation, a lot of women in that situation. They're in this program. And, I mean, as conservatives, entitlement programs, welfare programs, they get a lot of scrutiny from us. this is a type of like welfare program that conservatives are okay with, where it's like an end of the line safety net. This isn't even a handout. It's
right.
You want to work. You're trying to, you know, you're giving something, and then you want, you know, and we're giving you something. So it's, yeah, and I mean, these are genuine cases of need. So really bizarre that Governor Evers just ended this program. And you know, I talked about this before, how, you know, I read the program plan, and I have a master's in operations. I know what a program plan is supposed to look like. This isn't a program plan. There was no, like, typically a program plan has to include governance information, like how do you change this plan? How do you amend it? How do you terminate it? None of that. How do you make decisions? None of that's in there. So for all we know, you know, that would have told me who made the decision to cancel the program.
Right.
So for all we know, it's just some low-level bureaucrat in the Evers administration just made this call unilaterally.
Yeah, you looked at it and said, oh, 300 people? Well, that's not a constituency I'm worried about. And since they're all widows or widowers and have no kids, there's not going to be, you know, any ripple effect of people complaining about axing it.
Yeah, well, and the other thing is, I mean, we know that Democrats hate, like, working welfare programs.
Yeah.
So,
that's true.
So I mean, maybe that was kind of, you know, maybe they didn't really think too much about it and they just axed it, but very weird, completely outside the budget process, just unilaterally like that. So yeah, I mean, this was one to really hang around Evers' neck, and they just, you know, again, you know, missed opportunity.
Yeah, hey, send the article to people in the legislature, folks.
Yeah, and you know, one other thing, I mentioned this in the article too. I mean, this just shows, I mean, that is the type of program, the senior employment program, that donors and foundations live for.
Yeah.
You know, like, a program that helps little old ladies find minimum wage jobs so they don't get thrown out on the street.
Yeah.
I mean, that's one where, like, your typical billionaire is going to gladly open up the coin purse and keep it going because it doesn't even cost that much.
Right. 300 people. I mean, Bill, you and I could take care of, you know, 5 of those people.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, exactly. Well, like and so in Southwest Wisconsin, includes Rock County. That's there's like 40 people on the program.
Yeah.
Their annual budget is $380,000. So it's like absolutely nothing when it comes to government spending. So, but yeah, I mean, this is a great reason why you don't want government handling these programs. You want private charities to take care of these programs, because.
And didn't you also say that the person you talked to, who the nonprofit, said that we were given no notice, and had I been given notice, I would have been able to find alternative funding for this to keep this program going?
Exactly. So I mean, that's, again, 30 days notice. That is not enough time to secure donors. But this would never have been the situation, you know, had it not been a government program. So, you know, you don't want, you know, a really important program like this to, you know, be subject to the whims of someone like Governor Tony Evers, who could cancel it at a moment's notice.
Yeah. And super easy to manage something like this. Even if, like, all 300 of these people were, like, just in Rock County, right? 10 businesses would gladly take them on. Like, when I first started working, I was working at a pizza shop right out of high school. Our pizza shop, we employed kids with Down syndrome and severe autism, and they would come in twice a week in the morning, and they would help open up. And we paid the minimum wage.
Yeah, that's a great point.
We'd have like 10, 12 kids come in.
Yeah, you know,
it's like, you reach out to 10 employers. It's like, yeah, I can take one. They can work in the office or something, and, you know, run coffee or get papers or something like that.
Yeah, that's a great point too. I mean, one of the other problems with having the government manage this program is they have all kinds of weird requirements and restrictions. So they can't place these people, these senior citizens, in for-profit businesses.
Yeah.
It's got to be a nonprofit or a government office. So.
And capping, you know, the subsidy at minimum wage.
Yeah, that's the other one too, is, you know, let's say a private donor said, hey, this is a great program, but let's get these people up to $10 an hour. Can't do it. It's got to be minimum wage. That's what the law says. So, yeah, it's but yeah, I mean, like, private businesses do a great job with this too. And you know, you can tell, like, what a really good business is. Like, when you go to places like, I mean, say what you want about Walmart. They take care of a lot of people with
Yes,
severe disabilities and senior citizens, kind of like in these situations too.
Yeah, and not doing just like menial stuff too. The Walmart that I go to in Lake Geneva, they have a couple people there employed with Down syndrome. They work the checkout.
Oh yeah,
they're not bagging. They're working the checkout.
Yeah, Then Home Depot, I want to give them props too. I mean, they're another company where I look at, I see some of the people that that they'll hire, like severe. I mean, like really, really severe disabilities,
right.
And not Down syndrome, like like can't, like in like specialized wheelchairs sometimes.
Oh yeah.
So,
yeah.
I mean, that is a great talk about a great partner in the community.
Yeah, but a lot of these people who need help, they're very capable.
Mm-hmm.
They're almost all capable. You take someone with Down syndrome, for example, they can do most entry-level jobs.
Yeah.
They really can. So it's just that, there's this hesitancy to, bring them on, stigma, as the left would call it, right? Like, oh, is this person going to be a liability? Are they going to be more disruptive? Things like that. But look at the private sector. The private sector takes these people on, and 40 people in Rock County need help.
Yeah.
People will step up.
Yeah. So hopefully people see this story. I've been talking about it in all kinds of different forums. So hopefully that gets around. All right. So next we've got Dan O'Donnell broke this story earlier this week. Now the Evers administration is going after the Historical Society. Apparently, the Historical Society, they weren't flying the rainbow flag outside their building. They haven't been all that enthusiastic this year or lately on the LGBT movement. So the governor's chief of staff, Maggie Gao, apparently called them and started threatening them, and Democrat lawmakers started threatening them to cut off their funding. So, yeah, that's another interesting one.
Yeah, I can see. So it's so funny when you just try to fly under the radar, and just, here are the two flags we'll raise, the American flag and the Wisconsin flag. That's like, that's supposed to be neutral, yet it's a dog whistle for these people. And especially because it's a historical society, which is a notoriously communist discipline. So the fact that you have a society of historians or armchair historians not doing that is of great concern to people on the left.
Yeah, there's something interesting going on in the Historical Society. I am a member, and so I get their magazine. And I've been a member for about 2 years. And the first year of magazine issues, they send out for a year, it's like, oh my gosh, LGBT story, BIPOC story, it's just like everything in the magazine was, feminism, LGBT, multiculturalism, everything.
No military history bill, is that what you're telling me?
No.
Okay.
But over the past few months, I've noticed a change. Like the last 2 or 3 issues, those stories have just kind of tapered off.
Yeah.
Almost like I joked to my wife how I guess they ran out of LGBT history to highlight in the magazine.
Right.
But I just got the issue yesterday, and I started flipping through it, and I showed my wife, I'm like, oh my gosh, something is changing. Yeah. Here's a story about an old white guy, and here's another story about an old. There's like there was the current issue. It's not like they don't talk about, people of other colors or, women, but there is nothing that is overtly, pushing the diversity agenda.
Yeah.
Nothing pushing feminism, nothing pushing LGBT. And this is Pride Month, and I just got this magazine, nothing about LGBT in it.
Yeah.
So something is going on there. It's almost like, I wonder if it's played out.
Oh, like
it just, like
they're tired of it.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, they're a nonprofit, right?
No. So like,
are they public?
They're public. They're part of the state government.
Okay.
So they're one of those like quasi-state agencies where it's like they don't have a cabinet secretary. They rely a lot on donations. So they're kind of like yeah.
So that's what I was trying to get at, is where does their money come from? Okay, so if they rely on donations, then you sort of just, at some point you have to recognize that the people who are interested in history tend not to be these far left LGBT. Like these these leftists aren't donating to the Historical Society. But you see, they're not subscribing to these academic journals.
I don't know. I think there's probably a mix because it is a Madison institution. Their building they've got two major buildings here in Dane County. One is on UW-Madison campus.
Okay.
And then the other one is here downtown at the big museum. Oh. So, I mean, they're completely staffed by, like, Madison people. So, it is a liberal, it's inherently going to be a liberal institution because it's, government, university, and Madison, that cross-section. But, yeah, they are part of the government. They do get funding for, it's like your public library.
Yeah.
Your public library is a government institution. It gets money from the state government. It gets money from the local governments. And it also gets a lot, relies a lot on donations. So these interesting, funding mixtures. But, this is another huge missed opportunity for Republicans. They're putting together the state budget. Governor Evers completely stepped over the line on this stuff. You're going to cancel the senior employment program unilaterally. You're gonna bully the Historical Society to, you're gonna defund them if they don't fly the rainbow flag.
Right.
You know what I would have done if I was on Joint Committee on Finance? So yesterday they had their executive hearing. I would have taken up two items. I would have taken up the senior employment program, and I would have taken up the Historical Society. And even though you're talking about very like a fraction of a percent of the state budget. I would have dedicated the whole afternoon to it. I would have had all my members grandstand all afternoon about how Governor Evers has gone rogue, how this is not how you run government. He is hurting people because of his spitefulness. I mean, I would have really laid it on thick.
Yeah.
That's what Democrats would have done had the shoe been on the other foot.
Exactly, yeah. And there's a great irony here, the hypocrisy too, which is that all of these people are complaining that Trump is unilaterally cutting funding to programs, yet if a Democrat governor does it, it's okay. I mean, I thought we were saying this was illegal and unconstitutional.
Yeah, exactly. Another great talking point. I would have wanted you on my committee with me. All right, so then one more. Dan broke this one again yesterday. I mean, so this is the Russell Justice Center. This is here in downtown Madison. Apparently, they aren't flying the Wisconsin flag anymore. They're just flying the U.S. and the LGBT flag. I mean,
this is so telling, Bill. These people are nationalists. They love the state. They love the U.S. Mm-hmm. They love that it is this supranational super governmental structure that treats all of the states as just municipal agents of the federal government. They absolutely love this. If you were going to replace a flag as on a state building, you would replace the American flag. You wouldn't replace the Wisconsin flag.
Yeah. So this is that kind of reminds me of a prediction that I've had. How the American flag, you'll get liberals telling you how it's offensive.
Yeah.
So I've said for a while, the very last thing to go, the last vestige of our country will be the American flag.
Oh, yeah.
And it's going to happen a lot sooner than you realize. And then the other one is I just and this maybe we had President Harris instead of President Trump, but in the military they wear the American flag on their uniforms and it's a Velcro flag and you could swap it out. I would just someday there's either going to be a LGBT colored American flag on somebody's uniform, or it'll just be the LGBT flag in June. Yeah. So but now that Trump's in, that prediction kind of got torpedoed, but that's great. And speaking of Trump, there's a little bit of a saga going on right now. Trump and Musk. Give me your take real quick.
Okay, so I'm on Tom Woods' email list, and he sent out a great email yesterday, summarizing what's going on, and he brought receipts, and he posted all the different tweets from Elon. First one that shows up is Elon Musk retweets Speaker Mike Johnson, and Elon Musk says, "I super agree with this guy." Mike Johnson said, "At some point, Congress has to stop this endless cycle of out of control deficit spending," and Johnson said this in 2018, and Musk retweets it many years later, saying, "I agree with this." And then another tweet, Musk says, "Where's Mike Johnson of 2023?" When Johnson said the federal debt has just topped $31 trillion and the Congressional Budget Office now estimates federal spending for blah, 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 $6.2 trillion. This is unsustainable. And he just goes, down the line, and he retweets Donald Trump. Donald Trump in 2013 says, "I cannot believe the Republicans are extending the debt ceiling. I am a Republican and I am embarrassed." And Musk retweets it. Yesterday saying wise words, right? And just keeps going back.
Yeah, so this is a vicious. Maybe I should set this up a little bit. Yeah, so we got Trump with his big beautiful bill. It's going to increase the national deficit over the next 10 years by like $10 trillion or something crazy. Some made up number some fantasy number.
That's always wrong. That's always wrong.
Yeah.
Because it's always short. It's always more.
Yeah. Well, and it's some fantasy number because trillion, there's, it's some theoretical number.
Right.
And him and Musk have parted ways because Musk says, no, I just spent the last, 4 months identifying waste, fraud, and abuse in the government so you could cut spending, not so you could increase spending more. And
very much am responsible for getting you elected, too.
Yeah.
Go on.
Yeah, but then Trump has, all these things that he needs to accomplish. So, he's got his budget and, I'm not going to go on another rant about zero-based budgeting versus incremental budgeting, but that's part of this problem. We just keep piling on.
Yeah.
So it's really hard to have a new initiative or a new priority because without increasing spending, because all you ever do is pile on top of the old pile. It's vicious. They were really good pals, but you also have two billionaires, very successful type A billionaires it was inevitable, I think.
Right. Yeah. So just a couple more to show how it escalates. So he retweets Donald Trump, making that statement in 2013. Then he retweets Donald Trump in 2012 when Trump says no member of Congress should be eligible for re-election if our country's budget is not balanced. And then Elon Musk says, "Where is the man who wrote these words? Was he replaced by a body double?" Right? So this is like the inflection point where it really, starts to take off. Trump posts a tweet, says, "Elon was wearing thin. I asked him to leave. I took away his EV mandate that forced everyone to buy electric cars that nobody else wanted, and he just went crazy." And Musk says, "This isn't true." And from my own memory, I remember in like 2020, Musk was saying no subsidies for electric cars. You don't need subsidies. It's not necessary. And so Elon Musk, again, he starts retweeting all his own posts where he says, get rid of mandates, get rid of subsidies for EVs, even for Tesla. Like he's been consistent on this. And Trump later comes back and says, Musk knew everything that was in this bill. He okayed it, and now he's flip-flopping on it. And Musk says, "You're lying. No one ever showed me this bill."
So, yeah.
And this was the nail in the coffin. There's no coming back from this, in my opinion, after this final tweet. Here's the final tweet from Musk. "Time to drop the really big bomb. Real Donald Trump is in the Epstein files. That is the real reason they have not been made public. Have a nice day."
There is no reconciling your friendship after that.
Yeah, and just so everyone's clear, we already have the flight logs, right? And we know that Trump's name is on the list, right? He has spent time with Epstein. There's photos, things like that. A bunch of people have.
Yeah.
Just because you're on the flight log doesn't mean anything. But we already know that. So what Musk is implying explicitly
that he didn't just catch a
is that he didn't just visit the island that he's complicit in what's going there. So that's a really that's a burned bridge, in my opinion.
So I'm sure it's already out there, but somebody's going to go through what you just did, show all the tweets, put it to music. There'll be a video out there on social media. There isn't already by the end of today, I'm sure. But speaking of social media, here is, a couple of my favorites. So I think a lot of people might have seen this picture of Stalin. I should have pulled up the original picture of Stalin first, but this is a fun example of the first example of photoshopping. Here was Stalin with one of his friends back in the 30s. And then there's the same photo after
Yep.
they were no longer friends. Vanished from history, 1984 style.
Yep.
And then here's a really offensive comic strip called Stone Throwers. Sometimes they're less offensive, so your Lord of the Rings scene, throw that government waste in the volcano. No.
Yeah. So, I always appreciate a Tolkien meme.
Yeah.
Good stuff.
So.
But yeah, this is a burned bridge. It just mistakes all around. It was a mistake for Trump not to really have a firm grip on this budget going through. I think he's, had the opinion that this is what I want. I've been very clear. We're going to cut taxes. We're going to cut spending. We're not going to, have a huge deficit. Do it. And then the House did it, and he just sort of assumed that they did what he wanted.
Mm-hmm. So, yeah. So, I mean, this week, another crazy, interesting week in state and federal politics. This is just obviously the tip of the iceberg. The some of the real big things that we've been dragging MacIver, but also that you kind of need to know if you're trying to pay attention to stuff at all. So next week's going to be wild too.
Yes.
So, but that's all we got for this week. You got any final parting comments?
With Elon's last tweet accusing Trump of Epstein complicity. If you go on X and it's trending right now like crazy, and you see what all of the base is saying on Twitter is, well, if that was true, Democrats would have released it a long time ago. Obviously false.
Because they're all on it too.
Because they're all on it.
Yeah.
Right. So that's a really obvious thing not to forget. But it's also an accusation, and there's no reason to think that Musk has any idea at all. He doesn't have a clearance.
You're right.
Maybe he knows, Kash Patel, right, and talks to him. Maybe he's friends with Pam Bondi, whatever. But they probably don't know either.
Well,
with the Epstein file release that Pam Bondi and Patel did, it was just a re-release of all the files that had already been released.
All right, so
there was a huge story, for months that the New York FBI office was not cooperating.
Yeah.
And then suddenly, within a week or two, they cooperated fully. It was obviously not the case because we didn't get any new information.
Well, so
the deep state is still at work here.
Well, you just connected the dots for me too. So you have one of two scenarios here. One, Elon Musk doesn't know what he's talking about. He's just throwing out a wild accusation and knowing that it's going to do a bunch of damage.
Yeah.
Number two, somebody told him, like Kash Patel or somebody else. If that's the case, that was top secret classified information that he just leaked, and he could go to jail. It's one or the other. Either he doesn't know what he's talking about, and you just got a communications crisis, or he knows exactly what he's talking about, and you got a national security crisis.
Yeah. Well, going to jail, not Trump, but Patel or whoever leaked it would.
Well, Elon would too. If you're given top secret information and you just blast it to the public, that's a crime. You can't just do that.
Sure you can. That's what WikiLeaks is.
Well, yeah.
Right? I mean, he was, obviously Assange was prosecuted, but illegally prosecuted, right? He was protected by law. The law is written such that if you receive classified information, confidential documents, but you don't solicit it, then you're fine.
Oh, okay.
Right? Of course,
the
feds just really didn't like that he put it all out on WikiLeaks. And
that's the problem with these types of crimes, too, is it's not just the letter of the law, it's the political calculus with it.
Yeah.
So. Yeah. But anyway, all right, we're going to go on a whole other tangent here. So anyway, it's time to wrap it up for this week. But guaranteed, obviously, to
be continued.
Yeah. Everyone's appetite is whetted now, so next week will probably be another, a lot of explosions. So let's
hopefully not
literally, just narrative and debate wise. So politically, speaking. So anyway, until next week, we hope you guys have a great weekend. Summer's here. It's a beautiful weekend. Hope you're listening to this while you're mowing the lawn or lying in your hammock. And we will see you next week right here on the MacIver Report.
See ya.